see my screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, we can see.
Okay. Right. So before we start, so let me introduce myself. So can you all hear me, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. That's better. Right. Okay. Before we jump into the today's lesson, right? So today onwards we are going to learn, like you all know, Windows Server Administration. So basically, this is scheduled for 14 weeks. The course will continue for another 12 weeks or 12 weeks or uh, 10 weeks, right? So I don't know exact duration, so it depends, right? So, but the course has been designed for 12 weeks, right? So, uh, let me introduce myself first. So I am Sanjay Busseguda. So currently I work as a chief technical officer in Inex Private Limited, as well as I work for Nzinga as a solution architect, principal solution architect. I have 20 plus years industry experience, as well as this is I think I have been lecturing in Unitech from 2010, right? So this is, I think this is my 20 plus batch you all, right? So yeah, that's it from me, right? So yeah, can you see the presentation?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Right. Okay. Today onwards, we are going to learn, like I explained, so Windows administration. Basically, this course designed with the three modules. The first module, we are going to discuss about how to install Windows Server, how the installation methods and basic server configuration, like that. So the second phase, we are going to learn about the Windows server related services like Active Directory, FTP server, DHCP server, DNS server, file server, and storage server. The final course module would be, we are going to discuss about the Hyper-V and other latest technology which is come up with Microsoft, right? So to be honest, so learning the operating system is kind of a practical subject. It's not like learning about something like history or something like that. It's not like that, right? So this is kind of a live subject. So, and this is a complete practical subject. If you want to gain some kind of competencies, right? So definitely you should practice every day, right? So that is the only way. There is no any other alternative, right? So you have to practice it, and I need to tell you the final exam is 100% practical, right? So you have to be ready uh, in order to get some kind of a proper marks or proper grade. So you should practice all the stuff that we learn in the classroom. So basically you have a better hands-on experience, right? So I would recommend you to practice each and every day. So that is the only way to gain the competency of the Windows, not Windows, but also any operating system, right? So the third, like I explained, the third module, in the third module, we are going to learn what are the latest technologies and technology trends which is come up with the Microsoft environment. So to be frank, like learning operating system nowadays, the learning operating system or gain a competencies of operating system is not much, not give you an edge, right? So, but you have to, as a student, you have to know the basic architectural overview. So then only you can gain the better understanding of the new technologies. Like these days, I think you all know the hot topics are big data, data science, and cloud computing and cloud computing services, microservices. So so those are the things, those are the new in network security, data security. Those are the hot topics these days. So in order to get some kind of a good job after your graduation, so definitely you should gain this, at least you should have a understanding about what are these topics are, right? So but anyway, we are going to learn the operating system. That is a fundamental of the system engineering. So basically, I think I presume that you all have completed Linux administration course prior to this, right? So am I correct, right? So you all have completed the basic Linux administration thing in your previous semester, right?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Right. Okay. Hope you all have a very good understanding about the architecture of the operating system and all. So we'll see. Even if not, that is fine. So you can start from the fresh, but give you an added advantage if you have a proper understanding of the architecture. Irrespective of the operating system, name of the operating system, most of the operating system come up with the basic equal and same architectural concepts, right? So build on the same architectural concepts. So right, we'll see after the if you successfully completed this course, you may cover. You may you can. I think so. Most of the content which required to face the Microsoft MCSA examination, so we can cover right through this course, right? So let's see. So like I explained, so these are the topics, detailed topics which we are going to cover. So you will get the basic understanding of how to install operating system and operating system installation methods, as well as I'll touch some PowerShell commands and how basic and administration stuff that you can do through the PowerShell. The next topic would be Active Directory Server, how to install, configure, and manage domain controller. So those are the things that we are going to cover with this section. After that, we are going to cover the DNS and other services like FTP, DHCP, and file server and storage server services. We are going to discuss how to install, configure, and manage these services as well. So finally, if I have a chance, so I try to cover the bit of virtualization, like Hyper-V, install, manage, and install, configure, and manage Hyper-V server and Hyper-V cluster. If we have a chance, so definitely we can cover the clustering as well. So I don't know, that's depend on you guys, right? So we'll see what we can cover it up, right? So since this course delivery method is virtual, so I don't know, there should be a prerequisite, these prerequisites. So you may require the operating system like, you may require the laptop or desktop, which is having a 8 GB or higher RAM, as well as CPU, you should have a CPU which is supported the hyperthreading, as well as you need a VMware workstation or any other virtual type 2 hypervisor like Hyper-V or a VirtualBox or a KVM. That is fine, but you should have a software virtualization software which needs to install on your operating system, laptop or desktop operating system. So I hope you all have at least laptop and or a desktop, right? So unless otherwise, you might not have a chance to practice these lessons which we are covered through this module. So, but I request you to at least arrange at least once a month for a physical class. So you better to contact your university administration department and arrange it. So do you all can access the lab and no by any chance?
Yes, sir. We can request and we can get the lab.
Yeah, you better to request and made the request at least for once a month, right? So because the thing is there are a lot to practice, so definitely you should better to arrange some time on the university lab, right? That would be better rather than practicing it alone, right? So I can help you. If something goes wrong, definitely I can help you out. But here I don't know whether you do it or not. So that's in some. You better to request it today itself, right? Right. Those are the basic requirement, and also you may need the Windows Server operating system ISO file. So it could be a Windows 19 or it could be a Windows 16. That is fine. All are same family OS. So you have to have that. I think you all have experience how to use virtualization software and how to create the virtual machines and how to create the networking. That stuff you all have experience right now, right? You already have experience. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. Okay. But I highly recommend you to use the VMware workstation as a type 2 hypervisor. So when it comes to the virtualization, there are two types of hypervisors that you can find. One is type 1 hypervisor and one is type 2 hypervisors. So the hypervisor which is installed on the host operating system like Windows or Linux on uh, top of the operating system. So we call it as a type 2 hypervisors. So, but these hypervisors we are not using in the industry, right? As a commercial purpose, these are we use these type of hypervisor for testing and for the education purpose only. But the thing is, when it comes to the virtualization, the number one hypervisor is VMware. 90% of the virtualization implementation based on the VMware hypervisor. So the VMware workstation is the type 2 hypervisor, and VMware ESXi, vSphere ESXi is their type 1 hypervisor. But if you have a competency to use a VMware workstation interface, if you familiar with the workstation VMware workstation, that would be easy to adapt the ESXi ESXi GUIs, right? So that's what I recommend you to get used to use VMware workstation instead of using any other platforms like KVM or Oracle VirtualBox. Right. Okay. So these are the resources you can use to set up the lab environment on your desktop or desktop or a laptop. So I can share these slides with you, right? So these are the things I need to tell you prior to start the today's lesson. So if you have any question right now, up to now, right, you can raise. Is there any questions? Are there any questions? I want answers, guys.
I think no, sir.
Okay, so right, then without further ado, let's jump into the today's lesson, right? So before I start the lessons, I have some questions for you. I just need to get some idea about your knowledge and notes, and it will very helpful me to structure the future lessons, right? So tell me about, so have you ever installed Windows Server operating system?
Yes, sir.
You all have experience to install any server operating system, am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's good, right? So tell me, what are the installation types that we can use to install Windows operating system? What are the installation methods? Hmm? What are the installation methods?
Windows Server core version and GUI version.
Any different answers? Any different answers? Hmm? So answer is incorrect. The correct answer is mainly we use two methods to install operating system, irrespective of the server. I mean, even it is either it is virtual or a physical, it doesn't matter. So installation, there are two installation methods we use to install Windows operating system. One is with the iOS, ISO, and other one is remote installation, right? So the remote, under the remote installation, there are so many methods we can use. So we can use via the WSUS server or a WDS server. So we can use for install the operating system remotely, as well as the most easiest way to install the operating system is to use ISO or a CD-ROM, right? Windows installation. So through the Windows installation. So these are the two methods. One is remote installation, other one is ISO based installation, right? Or a Windows software based installation. So those are the two types mainly we use for installed operating system. So then you told me that the core version and with GUI version. What the difference between these two? What are those? Those are the options that you can get during the ISO when you perform the ISO based installation, right? So there are two types of there are two types of versions you can install. So one is core without GUI and with GUI, right? Those are the two versions that you can install. So let me so tell me, so what is the minimum hardware requirement to install the Windows 2012?
512
Windows 2016 or latest one is 2021, but what would be the 90 prerequisites? I think you will have
minimum to 2 GB RAM.
2 GB CPU and storage.
I think CPU maybe 1.4 gigahertz minimum, 64-bit processor.
So prior to start any operating system installation, the first thing you have to do is find out the minimum requirement and check whether your server configuration is fulfill the minimum requirement to install the operating system, right? For the Windows, right? So you just go to the Google and see what is the minimum requirement to install the operating system. For a server operating system, you can you should have a minimum 512 GB of RAM and 40 GB of storage, right? So this is for core install the operating system without GUI. And if you use the GUI, at least you should have a 8 GB of RAM, right? So there are two types of. So once you search the minimum configuration or hardware configurations to install Windows operating system 2019, they will give you the minimum requirement as well as the standard requirement as well as recommended minimum and recommended hardware requirements, right? So if you want to install the operating system with GUI, at least you should have a 8 GB or more RAM, right? And 40 GB of storage. So those are the main requirements to install operating system for the Windows, right? So what would be the minimum requirements of Linux? Prior to that, tell me what is Linux?
Linux is a kernel.
Linux is a kernel. Okay. Any other answers? Any other answers?
Linux like as operating system, but it using kernel to do processors with directly hardware.
No. Linux is a kernel, right? That answer is correct, right? So then what is Red Hat?
Red Hat is Linux, one of distribution, a distribution.
Slightly correct. Not. Can you elaborate much more? Red Hat is Linux-based operating system, right? That is the most simple answer for that, right? So then what is the responsibility of the kernel? Or prior to that, tell me, does every operating system has a kernel?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yes. that answer is correct. So each and every operating system in the world should have a kernel, right? Without having a kernel, we cannot build the operating system. That's why we call kernel is the heart of the operating system, right? So if that's so, tell me what is the responsibility of the kernel?
Manage the hardware resources.
Any other answers? මොකද්ද kernel එක කරන්නේ? Partially correct. Yeah, partially correct. Actually, the responsibility of the kernel is the kernel is the interface in between operating system and hardware. Main responsibility of the kernel is to allocate the hardware resources in order to process some kind of instructions. Right, so assume you just open the calculator and type 3 plus 1 equal, right? Then operating system application should give you the answer, right? The instruction is 3 plus 1 and you are waiting for the answer. So what calculator do, right? Does calculator calculate this? No, right? Anyway, fundamentally, it should goes to the processor, and processor itself only process this instruction, right? So what happened to the instruction flow? So, and what would be the instruction flow? The instruction flow is, so once you give you the instructions to the calculator, that instruction passes to the operating system. The operating system pass it to the kernel. Then once the instructions comes to the operating kernel, it decides what amount of RAM we should require to process this, and what inodes we need to use, and what type of how much of CPU space that may require to process this, and how they interact each other in order to give this answer, right? So those responsibilities comes to the kernel, right? So that is what kernel do, and that's what we call it as the heart of the operating system, right? So all the hardware managing part will be done by the kernel, right? So, right, okay. And tell me the next thing is, so what would be the minimum partition requirement to install the Linux?
Repeat it, sir. Again.
What is the minimum hardware, partition requirement for installing Linux operating system, Linux-based operating system?
One
So what is
partition.
what is the operating system that you used to use in previous semester? What is the Linux operating system that you use?
Red Hat Enterprise Linux, sir.
That enterprise Linux. Okay. Okay. Right. So what would be the minimum hardware requirement?
Means not totally we not totally Red Hat Linux. We also use our Debian operating system, Debian distro to do some practical in lecture site.
I barely hear you. I barely hear you. Can you repeat?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Not totally. We use Red Hat Linux. We use also Debian based Linux distro to practice lab activity.
That doesn't matter, right? So, but any irrespective of the distribution you use, right? So you can give me the answer whether you use Red Hat or Red Hat or Linux, so Red Hat or Ubuntu or Fedora. That doesn't matter, right? The concept is same, right? So architecture is the same because even though it is a Red Hat or a Fedora or Ubuntu, those are the Linux-based operating system, right? What are the major two distribution that in the Linux world?
Debian and Red Hat.
Partially correct. Debian and the Fedora, right? So for the Fedora desktop and Red Hat Linux goes under the Fedora core, and Ubuntu, SUSE, Mint, or Mint comes to the Fedora core, and Ubuntu and SUSE goes to the Debian core. Right? There are millions of Linux distribution, but those are use only the Linux kernel, right? So that's the main similarity of the Linux, right? But let's come to our question, right? What, irrespective of that millions of Linux distributions, Linux operating system, not a distribution, Linux operating system. So what is the minimum partition required? What is how many partition you require minimum to install the any Linux operating system?
One
Linux
partition. One partition. So,
that is sufficient. Is it? දැන් Linux දැන් දැම්මා කිව්වනේ. ඒතර එක partition එකයි දුවන. For the answers, you can use any language, that doesn't matter. Any in the sense the Sinhala or English, but unfortunately, I cannot understand the Tamil. So sorry about that. But I need answers because this is not a kind of a typical presentation-based lecture, and this should be interactive. So unless otherwise, you cannot gain the most out of this course, right? හරි දැන් මට කියන්න බලන්න දැන් ඔයාලා ඉන්ස්ටෝල් කරා කිව්වනේ දැන් එක පාටිෂන් එකයිද ඉන්ස්ටෝල් කරේ මම දන්නේ නැහැ මොකද්ද උත්තරේ
නෑ සර් නෑ සර්
මොකද්ද උත්තරේ එකයි නේද
එතකොට නම් පාර්ටිෂන් එකක් හදුවා සැප් එක බූට් එක වගේ
That's the thing, right? That's the major issue, right? So you will have to learn the concepts rather than doing how to do it, right? So you should learn the concept and you should learn the architecture, right? Unless otherwise, so what happens? So for the university semester or a lecture, you may learn Red Hat 8, right? But after the 3 years down the line, right? So when you go to the industry, right? Definitely you might the Red Hat 10 or 11 comes. What happened? That's why, right? So you should understand the concept first, right? Second thing is the how to perform, right? So basically, you should require two partitions. So one is root partition, other one is swap. Without having these two partitions, the installation doesn't let you to continue, right? Unless you let installation process to partition your hard disk as he wish, right? එයාට කැමති විදියට partition කරගන්න automatic mode එක select කරේ නැත්නම්, right? Or at least you should have two partitions, right? The SAP and root. So what is called SAP? What is the SAP? What's the SAP partition do? මොකද්ද මේ SAP partition එක කරන්නේ?
අපේ process run එද්දි RAM එකේ ඉඩ මදි වුණාම SAP එකට දාගන්නවා. ඒ කියන්නේ ඒ වෙලාවේ RAM එකේ ඒ කියන්නේ වැඩ නොකරන process ටික ඒ හරියට.
Any other answers? What does SAP do? මොකද මෙයා කරන්නේ?
SAP එක virtual memory එකක් විදිහට act කරනවා.
How you decide the amount of the SAP?
RAM එක 4GB වගේ RAM එක 8GB වලට වඩා අඩු නම් RAM එක වගේ දෙගුණයක් පාවිච්චි කරනවා SAP එකට. 8GB වලට වඩා වැඩි නම් අපි SAP එකක් පාවිච්චි කර ඒකෙන් භාගයක් වගේ පාවිච්චි කරන්න පුළුවන්. එහෙම නැත්නම් පාවිච්චි කරන්න නැතුව ඉන්න පුළුවන්.
පාවිච්චි කරන්න නැතුව ඉන්න බෑ. ඒක completely වැරදි. පාවිච්චි කරන්න නැතුව ඔයාලට install කරන්නත් බෑ SAP කරන්න.
default එක.
Default එකක් නෑ SAP එක. Uttare partially correct. You are partially correct. So right, but if your physical RAM is less than 8GB, you should. The best practice is to create a twice SAP partition which is equal to twice of RAM, twice of physical RAM. So if your physical memory is greater than the 8GB, you should use RAM plus 2GB as a swap. So how we decide what is the basis of decide this amount of the swap? So for that you should know how memory is working, how paging is working, right? Those are the things you should learn, right? Unless otherwise this is kind of a zero subject, right? It can't be, right? You better to check if you have a chance. So you better to check how much of so how the paging is work, right? How the virtual memory is allocating and know, right? So you should learn, right? So anyway, back into our lesson. So what if that? So if what do you call Linux required the two partition? Well, how about the Windows? What is the minimum partition that you require to install? Windows operating system?
One partition.
I think we install. Sorry, normally we install selecting the one partition, but also operating system generate the other partition for the health partition, like as health partitions in mini memory 100 megabits, so 100 megabyte, and yeah, that is.
No, partially correct. Those answers are partially correct. So tell me, so what is the major difference that you see when you use Linux operating system as well as the Windows operating system? What is the major difference? There are plenty of differences, but what is the major difference in between these two?
Open source and closed source.
Have you seen it when you use it? Huh? But make operating system, make close, make open source.
No, in that mean Linux is open.
දුරට යන්න එපා නිකම් basic මොනවද දකින්නේ? That's what I go. So what is the first experience? Based on the first experience, so what?
Windows is easy. Windows is easy and Linux is some complicated too.
In Linux, we can manage all themes, folder colors, and appearance. But in Windows, we can't do lot of things change.
Why is it? What the හේතුව දැන් ඔකට? What is the reason behind it? No, what is open source?
We can use
Open source
those things freely.
We can edit kernel.
Wrong. Answer is incorrect. Both answers are incorrect. What is open source? ඒක නෙමෙයි open source කියන්නේ.
Open source කියන්නේ නිදහස් මුදුකාම.
ඒක නිකන් හරියට open source කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? open source කියන එක සමාන පදයක් කියන්නේ සිංහල වචන කියන්නේ ඒ වගේ
Those license ගන්න ඕනේ.
I'm not asking the similar words.
Linux normally පාවිච්චි කරන්නේ.
මම කියන්නේ Linux නෙමෙයි මම මේ අහන්නේ Linux විතරක් නෙමෙයිනේ open source right? Not only the Linux, you can find the thousands of millions of open source software, right? So then what is the definition of open source? That's what I really require. මට ඕන මේ මිලියන ගාණක් open source තියෙන software. මොකද්ද මේ open source කියන්නේ? Open source කියන්නේ ඔයාට code එක freely available. That means you can get the code and you can do any modification to the code and recompile it and create your own version. Got the point? The Linux kernel is open source. That's why there are millions of Linux distributions. Linux-based operating system comes to in the world, right? But Windows is closed. Why? They don't let you to download their source code, right? Then what is Red Hat free and open source?
Red Hat is free and open source is come under GNU license, GNU license, but and in the Red Hat we have to take a subscription plan.
Incorrect, right? Red Hat is open source because you can download the Red Hat source code and recompile it, but it's not a free, right? You have to buy the subscriptions for their support, right? So free and open source in the sense you can freely avail source code would be freely available, but the CentOS is free and open source, but Red Hat is open source but not free. Right, so Ubuntu is free and open source, yes, right. SUSE is not a free and open source, but it's open source, right. So anyway, right, so let's jump into the topic, right. So what is the major difference in terms of the most powerful tool, right? In terms of the powerfulness of the tool, so when it comes to the Linux, so most powerful tool of the Linux would be the CLI, right? And most powerful tool of the Windows would be the GUI, right? So what is all the tasks which you can do through the command line when it comes to the Linux operating system cannot do through the GUI. The Windows is other way around, right? So all the tasks which you can done through the GUI cannot do through the CLI, but they are trying to gain that and that through the introducing the PowerShell, but still it's not success, right? Like Linux, right? Then what is the advantage and disadvantage of this? So when you work in a GUI, right, you cannot see what happened behind the GUI. Am I correct? Right? You just need to click the next button, but you don't know what happened behind the GUI, right? The collection of commands would be might be executed, but you didn't see, right? So then what happened? So if the set of commands might run behind the GUI. If one command fails, whatever, the entire process might fail, right? So, but when you troubleshoot it, right, it is easy. No, it's very difficult, right? When it comes to the troubleshooting, it's very difficult, and you don't know the concept behind that as well, right? So that's the reason why when you install the Linux operating system, right, it will give you the free hand to do it, and partitioning also might difficult when you go with the customized partitions. Right? Linux also trying to reach the expertise on GUI, but I think they are not able to gain that yet. But we'll see. Right? Also, the same thing happened in the Windows as well. Right? So Windows has a very good, in terms of the GUI, the Windows is the best, right? So, but in terms of the CLI, so Linux is best. That's what the admins, engineers operating system would be Linux, and users operating system would be Windows. So that is the reason behind it. So even though when you are during the installation process, you may not know what type of partition would be created and how many partitions would be created, you don't know. But at least for the latest Windows distribution, you should have a minimum 3 partitions. But the GUI let you to install creating one partition. Either if you are not create the partition, it doesn't matter. GUI will create the partition, format the partition, and install, right? So, but you don't know, right? That's the beauty of the Linux, right? So that's why gaining a better competency of the command line based operating system would be advantage, as well as if you have a proper knowledge and proper competencies of GUI based, CLI based operating system, it will much more helpful you to get understand about any concept of the operating system, as well as it is very easy to learn any operating system if you have a proper understanding of the CLI based operating system, right? Right. Okay. But like when it comes to the Windows, like you might require 3 partition, but operating the GUI installation steps, you can install it selecting any partition or any hard disk, right? So behalf of you, the installation process will create all the required partition and all, right? Okay, right. That's what basically I want to know from you, so I can I could get some kind of a understanding about your knowledge and all. You all have experience installing some kind of a Linux Windows operating system. So do I need to perform the installation? Or make run on Windows?
කරත් කමක් නැහැ සර්. ඒ කියන්නේ මොනවා හරි තව ඇඩිෂනල් දේවල් තිබ්බත් අපිට දැනගන්න පුළුවන්.
This is a Vmware workstation. My version is 16.2, right? So I presume that you all know how to create a virtual machine. So it's just go to the file and create a new virtual machine, right? They will give you the 2 methods. One is typical. Typical would be the recommend, and custom. Custom would be advanced, right? You can select the SCSI adapter types and virtual disk. All this you can select as you wish. If you select custom installation, if you typical, that would be the recommended way, right? We'll choose it, and then it's direct to the guest operating system installation. For me, I'll select I will install operating system later, right? If you have a ISO file, you can select it here, but this should be you better to select I will install the operating system later, especially if you want to install the license versions. So you better to select it, unless otherwise you will have a license keys, right? So anyway, I'm going to install Microsoft Windows. So my one is, I can't remember the exact version I have. Yeah, I have Windows 2016. That doesn't matter, same family, even though it is 2019. There is no any architectural changes in between these two. Right. Okay. So I'm going to select 2016, and virtual machine name, you can give the any name. I'll give kind of Bravo B1. You can select any name. And this is a location where the virtual machines is going to create a, right? So you can browse it and change it. That's fine. Then the size of RAM, sorry, size of the storage. So keep it as a 60. And you can select the two methods. So one is store virtual disk as a single file. I just select it because if you have a performance, if you have any concern about the performance of the virtual machine, you just select the multiple files instead of selecting a single file. Since this is going to be my lab server, so it's very easy to create it as a single disk. If this crash, I can choose this single file and I can power it up on any not kind of any hypervisor, any workstation where I install it in any machine, right? So, but if you select the split into disk into the multiple disks, you should select all the disk file. You should require to power up it on any other workstation which is installed on any other machine, right? So, but for that, since this is a test purpose, lab purposes, so I select the server virtual in a single disk, right? So here you can customize your memory. So here I am going to give 4 GB, right? 4 GB, and so go to the CD-ROM. I just want to select the ISO file. Right, so here I browse it and select it. Better to so prior to close this, you better to check connect at power on, right? Unless otherwise, the ISO file may not connect when you power up the operating system, right? Power up the virtual machine, right? Okay, then I close this and I finish the right. The browser is created. I'm going to start it, right? So it comes to this. Sorry. Right. Now it's booted to the installation first wizard, right? Let's give the wizard. So you can select the language to install. We use United States English, and time and currency format. Also, we use English United States. Keyboard layout would be the US, right? You can select it. Next, then it will ask two options. One is repair your computer, and other one is install now, right? So I'm going to install the operating system for here. So click install. Right, in here you can see four options, right? Four installation options. So one, the mainly it's in terms of operating system, it gives you two editions. One is standard edition, other one is data center edition, right? And the type of the operating system installation would be two types. One is with the GUI, other one is without GUI, right? So GUI is a piece of software, right? So that's it, right? But ultimately the function, all the main functions are same, right? So even though irrespective of you select the version, core operating system or a with desktop operating system, so all other feature wise it's equal, but it does not have a GUI edition, right? So today we are going to install the desktop edition. And let me know, bro, what is the difference between standard edition and data center edition? මොකද දැන් මේකේ options දෙකක් තියෙනවානේ. ඒ කියන්නේ operating system එක විදිහට ගත්තොත් ඔයාලට හම්බ වෙනවා versions දෙකක්, editions දෙකක්, එකක් standard edition අනිත් එක data center edition. හරි. ඊට පස්සේ type of installation එක ගත්තොත් ඔයාලට දෙකක් හම්බ වෙනවා. එක්ක ඔයාලට දාන්න පුළුවන් මේ edition දෙකෙන් ඕන එකක් දාන්න පුළුවන් මොනවද විදිහට desktop edition එක with the desktop experience. ඒ කියන්නේ GUI එකත් එක්ක දාන්න පුළුවන්. එහෙම නැත්නම් GUI එක නැතුව දාන්න පුළුවන්. හරි. දැන් මෙතන මට ඒ ප්‍රශ්නේ අපි දන්නවා. දැන් මොකක්ද අපි බලමු what is the difference in between this standard edition and the data center edition. So what is the difference? You all have to teach me, right? So you have experience to install this. Am I correct? දැන් ඉතින් දාලා තියෙනවා කියවනේ. ඉතින් මේවා දැක්කේ නැද්ද දානකොට?
data center එකේ features වැඩි, standard එකේ features අඩුයි.
මොනවද දැන් වැඩි features?
ඒක තමයි මට කියන්නේ.
නිකන් අරක ස්ටෑන්ඩඩ් කියලා දැක්කම ඒක නිකන් පොඩි වගේ කියලා හිතනවා. එහෙමද? නෑ මට ඒ උත්තරෙන් හිතෙන්නේ එහෙම ඒකයි.
මේකෙන්
වැරදි. සම්පූර්ණ උත්තරේ. එහෙමනම් ඉගෙනගෙන තියෙන්නේ උත්තරේ වැරදි.
ස්ටෑන්ඩඩ් එඩිෂන් එකේ හදන්න පුළුවන් virtual machine ගාන මම හිතන්නේ අඩුයි data center එකේ Microsoft official එක අනුව unlimited but it's depend on hardware on our service.
තව මොනවද තියෙන්නේ උත්තර? what are the other answers? Is there any different answer than these two? The first one is incorrect for sure. The feature wise there is no any difference in between standard or data center editions, right? All the features which is come on the standard edition or a data center edition come up with the other edition, right? So the only difference in between these two is number of Windows instance that you can create on the operating system that you are going to install. If it is a standard edition, so you can create up to 2 virtual instances, Windows virtual instances on the operating system that you are going to install, right? For the data center edition, if you install the data center edition, you can create unlimited Windows instances on top of the server which we are going to install, right? That's the major difference. But there is a limitation like he's explained, right? So even though theoretically you can create the unlimited virtual machines, right? So it's depend on the hardware requirement of virtual machine as well as its limit on the physical resources of the server which you are going to install, right? So that is correct, right? So if you assume if you having a if you are going to install the operating system on 128 GB RAM server, assume the server having 120 GB of RAM and let's say 1 TB of hard disk. So assume you have to create 10 virtual machines which is having at least 16 GB RAM, right? 16 GB of RAM as well as assume 200 GB of hard disk. Can you create the 10 virtual machine on top of the physical server that we are going to install the server? No, right? The thing is, if you create the 10 virtual machine and of each virtual machine having a 16 GB RAM. That means we need a 160 GB of RAM, right? Physical RAM, right? But unfortunately, we having only 128 GB RAM. So that is the main limitation, unless otherwise. So for the in terms of the operating system, you can create unlimited Windows instances, right? It let you to create unlimited instances on this particular server, right? හරි දැන් ඔක තමයි වෙනස කිසිම features wise වෙනසක් මේ දෙක අතර නැහැ, right? Okay, since this is kind of a virtual machine, I can go with the standard edition, right? Right, then it will pop up the license agreement. You should accept it, unless otherwise it won't let you to go further. Then it will give the two methods. One is upgrade, another one is install Windows only, right? So what does mean upgrade install? Upgrade Windows operating system. What is the difference in between these two? The upgrade in the sense, so definitely if you assume you use Windows 2012 R2, right? And this is the existing installation that you use for any purpose of your organization, right? So, and assume your existing data is inside on the server as well. If you want to keep this data and keep this configuration, and if you want to upgrade it to the latest version, so you can do it selecting upgrade operating system. Cover gas volume got in. Hari, it was a installation එක ගත්තොත් ඔයාලට මේක if this is a fresh greenfield implementation, so you can select the install operating system, right? So that I am going to install advanced. So here is a storage. You can create the partition, or you can select the hard disk, right? So operating system, the installation process will create the appropriate partition that required for installation, right? Or else you can create a new partition here and assume you are going, I will give 30 GB. So okay, then it will create all required partition automatically, right? So once I give the size which I really require, right? So you can format it, right? You can delete it, right? So anything, right? So you can select the appropriate partition that you are going to install and press next. It will take some time to install it. So prior to that, tell me, so what is, no, we'll discuss this in the further lesson, right? So it will take some time. So until the installation going on, so so if you have a workstation installation, so you can perform with me, right? So do you all have a ISO installation? Do you all have an ISO file? or not?
No, sir.
No, sir. I think we have to download the.
Yeah, you have to download it unless you don't have, right? Unless otherwise, I think the best thing is you request at least lab for once a month, right? Unless otherwise very difficult to practice.
So මාසෙට දවස් කීයක් වගේද අපි රික්වෙස්ට් කරනවා.
ඔව් නැත්තම් ඉතින් ඔයාලට එක්සෑම් එක වෙලාවට උතෙන් ආවට පස්සේ ඔක කරගන්න බැරි වෙනවා අනිවාර්යයෙන්.
දවස් 8ක්.
You better to create at least create one WhatsApp group, include me. So I will share you the study materials as well as the links that you have to follow, right? Right. So after the installation, what are the steps that you have to do? So what's next to do after the installation? මොකද ඉන්ස්ටලේෂන් එක ඉවරලා දැන් මේකේ ඉන්ස්ටලේෂන් එක ඉවරයි. So මොකද්ද තව තියෙන්නේ අපිට කරන්න? මොකද්ද ඊළඟ ස්ටෙප්ස් ටික? What did you do?
We have administrative password.
මොකද්ද මේක ඉවරලා කරන්නේ? ස්ටෙප් එකක් විදිහට දැන් admin password එක දෙන එකත් ඉන්ස්ටලේෂන් එකේ එකක්.
නමක් දාලා දාන එකයි Windows update off කරන්න.
ඇයි Windows update එක off කරන්නේ?
අර මේ මැදදී සර්වර් එක මේ අප්ඩේට් වුණොත් එහෙම මේ සර්වර් එක shut down වෙන immediately.
We can set static IP for server.
No. Prior to those, you have to do something. That is part of the installation, right?
After the installation, we must to get full updated and activate our Windows OS.
No.
අපි නම් කරන්නේ ඉතින් ඔය ටික ගහලා crack එකක් දාන්න.
ඒක තමයි වැරදිලා තියෙන්නේ. ඒ හරි දැන් මෙතෙන් ආවා දැන් පාස්වර්ඩ් එක දුන්නේ. තව මොනවද කරන්නේ? What happens if it is a physical server, right? You are going to install it. So once the installation finishes, right? So what you should do? What you should require to do? Have you ever heard drivers? Have you ever installed the drivers? We call it as Windows drivers, Linux drivers, huh? So and so. So what does drivers mean? Then
Utilities program. Utilities program. Computer के बड़े करेंगे ना बड़ा उन्हें ना utilities program.
වැරදි. මේවා කරේ නැද්ද? දැන් ඔය ඉන්ස්ටලේෂන් එකක් කරා කිව්වනේ. ඉන්ස්ටෝල් කරා මේවා කරේ නැත්නම් ඕක incomplete. If you do this in my exam, I don't know others, right? You do this in the my exam, so I don't give you the any mark because it is incomplete. any operating system install, right, irrespective of virtual or a physical, right, the second most thing you have to do is you have to install drivers, appropriate drivers, right? So what happens? So assume, so you all can see my screen, right? Right. So see, so I put it into the full screen mode, right? Does this give you the full screen? No, right?
No.
So why is that? That means for the Windows installation driver and the actual driver which is having this virtual machine does not incomplete. So you cannot use the full VGI features. And also, right, if you are not, you install the proper drivers, right? So some hardware might not work in an optimal way, right? If you want to make all the hardware works in an optimal way, right, you should install the appropriate drivers, right? If you install any operating system on the physical hardware, you should download the device drivers from the vendors website, right? All the vendors, like, so what are the physical server vendors that you all know? What are the physical server vendors? Have you ever seen the physical server? Physical server එකක් දැකලා තියෙනවද?
No.
දැකලා නැහැ ඒත් ඉන්ටර්නෙට් දැකලා
දැකලා නැත්නම් ඉතින් එකම දේ ක්ලාස් එක දාගන්න නැත්නම් ඔබ හරියන්නේ නැහැ මම එහෙම මොනවත් එකක් ගෙනල්ලා පෙන්නන්න. හරි. හරි දැන් මේකේ පේනවාද දැන් මේකේ තියෙන ප්‍රශ්න මොකද්ද මේ VGA එක හරියට අරගෙන නැහැ. හරි මේ වගේ ඔයාලා device drivers install කරේ නැත්නම්, right? So what happen is you cannot make most out of your hardware, right? Hardware does not work in an optimal way, right? So in order to get the most out of this, so if it is a physical machine, definitely you should download the appropriate drivers from the vendor's website. And if it is a virtual machine, so you should install the virtual drivers. We call it as a virtual tool. When it comes to the VMware world, we call it as a VMware tools, right? When it comes to the Hyper-V, it's a Hyper-V tool, Hyper-V utilities. So we call that, right? You have to install it, right? So unless otherwise, sometime you might face some kind of a connectivity issues or a VGA issues or it's give you the malfunction and it's not work properly. It may not work properly. So best practice is you should install the VMware tools, right? How we install, right? Go to the VMs and install VMware tools, right? Install it, right? Once you click install it, you can find the installation file. It's mounted to the CD drive, right? So then run it, right? So goes to here, go to this PC, you can see the installation is mounted to your CD-ROM, CD-DVD-ROM, right? You just click it, right? Press next. Better to create typical and press next. Haven't you installed VMware tools or a workstation, Hyper-V tools when you install the Linux operating system? Linux දාදි දැම්මේ නැද්ද?
Oracle VirtualBox එකේ නම් additional tool එක දාලා තියෙනවා.
See the difference? Hmm? Have you seen the difference? So, right. තේරුණාද මේකේ difference එක තේරුණාද? Not only the VGA, right? This is a one example, right? So, but also network, hard disk, and all the hardware. If you want to make them to use in optimal way, so you should install the tools, right? So all the hypervisor vendors provide their appropriate tools for all the major distributions like Windows and Linux, right? Right. So now we have installation is successfully done, right? So then the next thing we have to do is we have to perform the basic configuration, right? So what are the basic configurations that you will have to do? Like you tell earlier, so you have to give the proper server name, and if you having a domain in place, so you have to add this computer to domain, and prior to that you should give the static IP and the gateway address, so on, right? So those are the information you have to configure, right? So for that, the most easiest way is use the server manager, right? The server manager automatically start when you logged in, or unless otherwise you have to go to the start menu and select the server manager, right? In server manager there's a dashboard, right? So if you want to see the all the basic configuration in one window, you just select the local server, right? All the basic configuration that you need to perform is in here, right? Listed in here, so you can change accordingly, right? So if you want to change the computer name, go to here and click it, so it will give you the wizard, right? So you just click the change, right? I just give Bravo one, right? So I don't have right now I don't have a domain, so I don't want to join it, right? I just keep it as a default, press next, okay, bye. So it will ask the restart. I'll give the restart later, right? So once the restart gives, right, so computer name might change, right? So then I want to power off the Windows firewall. It's not a recommended way, but for the lab purposes and training purposes, I turn off the Windows firewall, right? It's applied, right? So the next thing is I want to give you the static IP address for this. So you can select it and right click and go to properties. And here I'm going to give the IPv4 address. I don't have IPv6 address right now. So I'll give you I change the IPv4 address, go to the properties. Then there's a two methods we can use. One is obtain IP address automatically, and I can give the IP address as a static manual, right? So what is the difference in between this? මොකද්ද මේ දෙකේ වෙනස? Hmm? Have you ever configured the IP address? Hello?
Yes, sir. When we put IP address manually, it will be assigned as statically, but when we select the automatically take IP address, it get from DHCP, sir, seeking DHCP.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that answer is my correct, bit of correct, but the complete answer is if you select the automatically, you should have a DHCP server because once you select the automatic IP address assigned automatically, then it try to contact the DHCP server, right, and get the IP info, all the network related info configuration from the DHCP server, right? So if you select the manual, so IP address, use the following IP address, that means you have pick the one manual IP address and you have to configure it, right? So manually configure it. If you are having your organization having 100 desktops, so you should manually maintain the IP list, because if you give the same IP address for 2 machines, then you will face the IP conflict issue, right? So and tell me what is, so if you select this, right, so what are the IP address types that you can use? Huh? What are the types of IPv4 addresses? What is the length of IPv4 address?
32 bits.
Okay, 32 bits, right? Right. So what are the classes of IP address? IPv4 address.
Class A, B, C, and multicast in IPv4.
Any other ideas? තව මොනවා හරි තියෙනවද? Classes කීයක් තියෙනවද? මේ කියපු උත්තරේ හරියද?
And in that case, we have to use private IP address.
The same issue. You learn something, but not in a correct order or not in a appropriate way. So that's the issue. So what are the other answers? I think there are 15 people logged into the class, right? I heard only 2 or 3 of your sounds. Yeah, අනිතට තේරෙනවද මේක? Have you all are in a same phase or not? I don't know. I feel like I do the class only for 3 or 4 students, because all others are silent. I don't know, you may understand or not, so I will continue. I do. දැන් මොකද්ද මේ දැන් ඔය දැන් මම අහුවේ මොකද්ද IP addresses වර්ග කීයක් තියෙනවද? IPv4. So So what are the types of IP addresses when it comes to the IPv4? මොකද්ද මේකට උත්තරේ? දැන් routing switching ඒවා ටික ඉගෙනගෙන තියෙනවා නේද?
private address and public address.
Hari, private and public address. Hari, what is the difference in between these two?
Public address only we can use globally, but private address we cannot connect. We can only use private address range in our local area networks. We cannot communicate over the internet using private address. Public address already assigned, and that's the thing.
Any other answers? Any other guesses at least? Any other guesses? Yeah, mainly we can divide it into two, right? When it comes to the IPv4 addresses, one is private and public, right? So major difference in between private and public is the public IP addresses we can use. We need a public address to browse the internet or goes to the internet, right? So the private IP address we can use inside our organizations, but we cannot use this to goes to the internet or a wide area, access the wide area network, right? So this is the main difference in between private and public address. When it comes to the private address, we can find 4 classes. One is class A, class B, class C, and class D, right? So am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Hari. Then what is called subnet? Subnet එක කියනවා. Why we use subnet?
Subnet we can use for large broadcast domain into multiple broadcast domain in layer 3.
වැරදි. Any other guesses?
Identify the host.
No. Oh. දැන් කාටද ගහන්න ඕන දැන් කාට ඉගෙන උගන්නපු ගුරුවරුන්ටද නැත්නම් තමන්ද? IP address එක part කීයක් තියෙනවද? When you get the IP address,
2 parts.
for what? What are these two parts?
Subnet parts and host part.
I think you better to ask, request the lab for each and every classes.
Network part and host part.
The mainly you can find the two parts, right? So one is the network portion and the other one is host portion, right? Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever learned this? I don't know. If not, I have to do it. Otherwise, we cannot continue. මේ කරලා තියෙනවද නැද්ද? මම දන්නේ නැහැ ඉතින් කරලා නැත්තම් කියන්න. කරලා තියෙනවද? මේ මගේ ස්ක්‍රීන් එක පේනවා?
Yes, sir.
හරි. මේව ගත්තොත් screen එක පේනවනේ? Can you see my screen?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay. Right. Assume so there's an IP called 1 right 192.168.1.2 right, and there's another IP address 192.168.1.3. Other one is 192.168.2.1. So මට white board එක එන්නේ නැහැ. Hi, Meduna Benane. Can you all see my screen?
yes, yes.
Right. Tell me if I ask from you, so tell me what are the IP address which is belong to same network. Can you guys tell me? There are 3 IP addresses. I just wanted to know what are the IP address which is belongs to the same network. Can you all?
Actually, without seeking subnet mask, we can't tell it.
Any other answers? Any other guesses? Yes, that answer is correct. So without knowing the subnet mask or without knowing the appropriate subnet mask of the IP address, we cannot decide what portion. We cannot decide what portion is belongs to network and what portion is belongs to host. So that the subnet mask we use to identify the network portion of the IP address as well as the host portion of the IP address, right? What happen? So if I tell you, so /24. හරි මම 24 කියලා දුන්නොත් මොකද වෙන්නේ? /24 කියලා දුන්නොත් what are the IP address which is belongs to the same network?
ඒ කියන්නේ IP 3ටම /24
Yes, yes.
එතකොට සර් උඩ තිබුණ දෙක same network අර දෙවනියට තිබුණ එක another network.
ඇයි ඒ? Why is that? What does mean that subnet is 24? What does it mean?
Uh, 24 mean 32-bit within 24 can use for network. Other rest of bits only can change as host.
Everyone is agree for this? කට්ටියම agree නේද මේක උත්තරේ? So when we take the IP address, right? So we can clearly find the four segments, right? So 192 is a one portion, 168 is another portion, 1 is another portion, and the rest of is another portion. You clearly identify 4 portions, right? Since the total length of IP address is 32, right? Each segment, right, divided into 8 bits, right? Consists of 8 bits, right? Each segment consists of 8 bits, right? So it's like the binary. So when it comes to the binary, each segment having a 8 digits, right? So that's how it's become a 32 bit address, right? So keep it in mind. So that means for all first 24 bits belong to the network portion. That's what subnet mask says, right? So what is another notification that we can use for subnet mask? Instead of having 24, 8, 16, something like that. So what are the other notifications? Other notification would be 255, 255, 2550. What does it mean? Does both are equal or not? It's since I don't have a whiteboard, it's very difficult to explain it. Right, so unfortunately, my whiteboard doesn't work. Something might wrong. So, but so definitely. So, tell me, is those both notifications are same or represent the same thing or a different thing? 24 and 255, 255, 2550. Like I explained you, size each portion having a 8 bits, right? So 8 bit means 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 8. So what is the biggest, right? Biggest number that you can create using these 8 bits? The biggest again. So when it comes to the binary, the biggest one is all octets are 1. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right, when it's converted into the decimal, so what would be the number?
255.
Right, so that's mean full of the bits we can allocate for the network, right? So for the first part, so we have 8 bits, right? So if it is full, that means each octet would be 1, right? Then it, when it's converted into the decimal, it notify as a what? The 255, right? That's how we notify, right? So we have another subject called VLSM, right? Subnet variable subnet mask. So you have to learn it on your network lesson. So definitely. So if you divide it into these 4 classes, so the class D address would be /24 address, right? /B would be 16 bit, right? Class A /8 network, right? So then you can decide how many how many different hosts you can use with the same network or something like that. You can decide it, right? So those things you will be learned during your network lessons. So, but if not, definitely you should learn it, right? So for today classes, I think I have to wind it up now, right? So basically that is how we configure the IP address. So basic configuration we'll discuss on the next class. So when you are free to do the next class?
So according to the timetable, you have to do next Thursday day after. That means day. I හිතන්නේ බ්‍රහස්පතින්දා හවස තමයි ඉස්සරගේ තියෙන්නේ.
හරි එහෙනම් බ්‍රහස්පතින්දා හවස 7ට මෙයා කරන්න.
ඕකේ සර්. එකයි කාලට තමයි මේ දාලා නම් තිබුණේ ටයිම් ටේබල් එක. ඒක 7ටම දාන්නද නැත්නම් ඒ වෙලාවට සෙට පුළුවන්ද?
ඔව් බ්‍රහස්පතින්දා මේ පාර හොලිඩේ එකක් නේද?
ඔව් සර් ඒත් මේ යුනිවර්සිටි එකෙන් කිව්වා හොලිඩේ ගණන් ගන්න නැහැ කියලා. එහෙම.
හරි එහෙනම් 7ට දාගන්නකො.
ඕකේ සර්.
හරි 4ට දාගන්න මේ අදට පොඩ්ඩක් ක්ලාස් එක නවත්තු මටත් පොඩි වැඩක් තියෙනවා right okay එහෙනම් let's meet on Thursday, right? So when you come to the Thursday class, right, so I'll before that, so right soon after this class, so please create the WhatsApp group, right? And add me as well, right? I will share some links that you have to refer prior to come to the class. You better to refer it and come, right?
Okay, sir.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, guys. Good night. Bye.
Yes, okay.
Thank you, sir.